Comes from James chapter 2, verses 1 through 17. My brothers and sisters, do you, with your acts of favoritism, really believe in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ? Or if a person with gold rings and in fine clothes comes into your assembly, and if a person in dirty clothes also comes in, and if you take notice of the one wearing the fine clothes and say, "Have a seat here, please," while to the one who is poor you say, "Stand there," or "Sit at my feet," have you not made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with your evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers and sisters, has not God chosen the poor in the world to be rich in faith and to be heirs of the kingdom that he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor. It is not the rich who oppress you? Is it not they who drag you into ruin? Is it not they who blaspheme the excellent name that was invoked over you? You do well if you really fulfill the royal law according to the Scripture. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you show partiality, you commit sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become accountable for all of it. For one who said, "You shall not commit adultery," also said, "You shall not murder." Now, if you do not commit adultery, but if you murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so act, so as those who are judged to be by the law of liberty. For judgment will be without mercy to anyone who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. if you say you have faith, but have not works, can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill, and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead.
Seven years ago, Wayne Howell walked into this sanctuary. He was homeless, living on the street. He was one of those people that James was talking about who didn't come in wearing fine clothes. And I'm happy to say he's still here. He found a warm and gracious welcome, and he has been giving to Bethel ever since. He has helped with many things, music, readings. He helps with our symphony now. He does all sorts of things around here. He told me once that his objective was to make himself indispensable. And so I think that that's really a wonderful thing, that not only was he welcome and then away and welcome back, but he became a giving part of the community, giving to Bethel as a community and to the community as a whole. Wayne, we're happy you're still here. Now, it so happens that on that same Sunday, which was actually September 11th, 2011, Sandy and I joined this church. So we have kind of a three-way anniversary on this particular homecoming Sunday. And I must say, I know that all three of us have felt welcome ever since then. So that particular reading in James was really wonderful to have on this particular Sunday. And I did not plan that out. It popped up in the lectionary, and I went, oh, cool. I know I'm going to have Wayne reading that one when we get to that Sunday. So anyway, thank you for reading Wayne. Our gospel message today is from Mark chapter 7, verses 24 to 37. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice, but a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. But she answered him, Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he said to her, For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. So she went home and found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of Decapolis. They brought him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then, looking up to heaven, he sighed, and he said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered him to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. May we hear and understand what the Scriptures are teaching us today. So, James is all about us being open and and being welcoming and sharing our gifts and our love. So what's up with Mark? A lot of people, when they read this, they miss something about this particular reading. Now, they probably recognize that these two miracles that are described, the woman's daughter and the deaf man, are miracles worked in Gentile territory. And they may even connect to the preceding passage in this. But they don't actually mention this progression where Jesus, from feeding the crowd and the healing and miracles among the Jews, through his teaching about what's clean and unclean. Remember the stuff about washing the hands and all of that kind of stuff last time? And how important what's in our heart is? And his acting on that teaching today in the healings of two Gentiles. These were unclean people, right? And then finally, in chapter 8, we'll hear another story about feeding this huge crowd that is primarily Gentiles. But one of the things that's interesting in here, they're talking about the other side, or trips to places like Tyre or Sidon. I think he's making this larger point. Not only was this Syrophoenician woman not Jewish, okay, so she was Gentile, but what you might not know is that she's a pagan. My goodness. Jesus talking to pagans and healing them. Sometimes people feel uncomfortable with that. And what's up with her talking back? You know, he practically told her that she and her little girl were dogs, right? He said, you know, feed the children first, meaning the children of Israel, the Jews, his people. You know, but you shouldn't take food that belongs to the children. And then she says, even the dogs get the crumbs. Boy, that took some spunk. You know, that really, you know. And then Jesus is like, oh, that is a lot of faith coming from this woman who is a pagan. She's not of our religion. And yet she says, I know that I get these crumbs. The larger picture, she was entitled to that love of God. She was entitled to that gift, the healing and the provisions that God promises. He'd been talking already about how there's not Jew or Greek, not man or woman, but that God's gifts are for everyone. So when we look at this little story of these two people, these two Gentiles, the pagan woman, strong, fighting back, talking back, saying, I want that gift from God. I want it. I want to claim it. I think about the contentious conversation that Jesus just had with the scribes and the Pharisees at the beginning of this chapter about the washing hands and all this stuff and him declaring all the foods clean, all that kind of stuff. I think about how he's clearly saying this ministry is for everyone. You got to look at what's in your heart. You got to look at what's in your soul. It's not the food that goes into your stomach that defiles you, said he last week. It's rather the things that come out of you that are in your heart. So he shocked all the religious authorities and all the crowds and decided, you know what, I need a break. I'm going to go out of town. Now, leaving his own territory, right? I'm going to take a break, goes over to the Gentile territory, comes across this pagan woman who basically demands healing. I have some colleagues who do say, oh, we shouldn't consort with pagans. We shouldn't have anything to do with these unbelievers. And of course, there are some people who claim to be Christians who think they shouldn't have anything to do with me. You know, I'm kind of a heretic when it comes to the, totally what they say is conservative, fundamental evangelicals. They're none of those things. They're none of those things. They're not Christians. I have such trouble with that. Such trouble with that. They're not following the way of Jesus. They can't say they're conserving the teachings of God and Christ and being conservative. They're not. They're being heretics. I'm sorry. Anyway, but I know that I'm considered wrong by some of those types of people. You know, after all, what are you doing what is Bethel doing having a lesbian minister? My goodness. You know, what's going on with that? And a woman to boot. I actually had one friend who, they came and they loved the church and they had a great time. And they weren't, the issue that bothered them, because I think they didn't know, because I usually don't come out with statements like you have a lesbian minister, right? I usually don't come out with that they liked the sermon and the music that we did that week and everything about that. They said, but I don't know, a woman in the pulpit, I can't go there. Anyway, I think that one of the Marys and Lydia will be doing the face palm thing at that. But it's just, Jesus was sharing this with everybody. And sure, he's saying, wait a minute, this food is for the children of God. She's like, you know what, I'm one of those. I can have those crumbs at least. And he gives her props. He recognizes it. He says, you know what, you get that faith because you said that demon's gone. It's out of here. Those of us in these times don't really recognize that the Syrophoenician people were this really strong pagan area. But the early Christians, the ones that were following Jesus at the time, his own disciples, and of course the teachers across the lake there, they would have known who this was. They would have found this healing of this foreign pagan child much more shocking than the words that Jesus used first to turn down the mother. How is it that a gift of healing can be so shocking? It's that persistence, the tenaciousness of the mother in this. She has been raised neither in Judaism or Christianity. So it isn't just a pagan, but a pagan woman. And you know what? It tells everybody to listen. Some people that write about this, they say she was formidable. She was essential. She was the person that had to be in the story for us to understand the early outsiders in the church. And there are still outsiders. Some of them have the courage to try to come in. And that is where one of our jobs begins, to make them welcome and to make them understand, yes, they belong here, this is where they should be, and they can give to this community and become a vital part of it. This Syrophoenician woman, she not only breaks into Jesus' retreat. You notice how they say he can't get away from them. No matter where he goes, he can't get away from them. He keeps trying to get some rest. That other story where he was at Peter's mother's house, you know, and everybody's banging on the doors, oh, you got to heal this person. He can't get away. So she not only breaks into that, she breaks a whole bunch of conventions, especially ones about holiness and cleanliness and those things that he was just dealing with, because she touches him, which means that he, the Jewish male, was touched by an unclean Gentile woman. That's against the rules at the time. She is some sort of woman of position and means. Her little girl is lying on a bed. Now, we might not think anything of that, but at that time, that's actually quite a comfortable standard of living, to have an actual real bed. Her position in this story is not at all insignificant. In fact, we wonder sometimes, the feminist theologians of the world, whether Jesus' rude-sounding response might reflect some of the conventions of that sound, of that time. Borders were crossed. Boundaries were crossed. Things happened. But you know what? In the end, Jesus is calling foods clean. Jesus is healing a foreign woman and her daughter, a pagan woman. He's healing a Gentile man. Where are those rules that you can't consort with someone who's not just as holy as you are? They're gone. little lessons in this. Just one, not a really terrific transition here, but there are those of us who could hear in her response, some of your mothers, fathers, as he says, this is for the children, not for the dogs, and she says that the dogs get the crumbs, right? Her thoughts. Who cares what he says or believes if he has the power to heal my child? Who cares what he calls me or what he thinks about me? I want him to heal my child. When I looked at that, I thought, it made me think about some of the doctors who refuse to treat some people. Anyway, we need some tenacity there. But one of the biggest lessons, I mean, if this were May, I'd probably use this scripture for a Mother's Day sermon about the tenacity of maternal love. She is determined. And she gets what she's after. She gets it because Jesus is there to share that with everybody. No Jews, no Greeks, no women, no men. It says something about this incredible generosity of God, that even the crumbs from the table are more than enough for all of God's children. The crumbs from the United States table are more than enough for all of God's children to eat. And yet, so, who is other? Who's an outsider? Who is unworthy? This story, painful as its portions are, teaches us a lot about accepting and welcoming the other, and about giving the other the things that we can give. It doesn't matter whether the other is a woman, a foreigner, a member of a different racial or ethnic group, a member of a different political party, a person of a different sexual orientation or gender identity. It doesn't matter whether they are able or disabled. It doesn't matter whether they've got clean clothes on or dirty clothes on. It doesn't matter whether they have holes in their jeans and their jackets or whether they are perfectly coiffed and wearing an evening gown out for the opera. It doesn't matter. They are all welcome and loved. Sadly, deep down, some people who think of themselves as good Christians find some people unclean and unworthy of being included to God's feast. I had a chat about a week ago with a man who was distraught, literally distraught, because of something that had been happening with his sister, and it had to do with attitude. The sister had had a brain tumor, and the tumor had been being treated, and she'd been in the hospital, and things had been going fairly well. But after she came out of the hospital and was in recovery and going back to church, there was a young man at the church, married, a couple of kids. He was one of their worship leaders. The fellow I was talking to is another musician, and he says he was one of the worst choir directors he'd ever seen, but he was a nice guy. Well, shortly after she got out of the hospital, the man decided he was going to follow through with something that had been hurting him, hurting his spirit for his whole life. And that is, he finally acted on his gender identity and went through the whole transition, including the surgery. And he was immediately ousted from his family and from his church. The sister of my friend said, "He's dead to us now, and I so mourn his loss." And my friend said, "What? He's not dead. She is still alive." And if you say that you love God, if your church claims that you love God and you love everybody, what are you doing telling this guy he's dead now? What are you doing throwing him away? No one should be thrown away. Even if you disagree with them doing a transition, a gender identity thing. So then they said something to my friend about, oh, well, we love the sinner, but not the sin. They said, well, you're not showing love to the sinner, and who says it's a sin? But anyway, we must have talked for an hour and a half. And I'm going to tell you, I was completely uplifted. This guy doesn't come to our church. He has his own church. He has his own life. You know, he has a multi-faith household. He grew up in this very conservative, fundamentalist home. He himself is amazingly liberal and loving and welcoming of all people. And he is literally torn up about how do I respond to my sister who's still recovering from this brain tumor, and yet she's espousing all of this hateful stuff. What do I do with that? Well, you love her. You love her and you talk about how to show love. I can tell you, my friend is determined to make contact with this guy and tell him, I support you. That's it. And I thought, what an amazing witness from a guy I never even knew he had any kind of faith at all. To be honest with you. I just see him every once in a while in the back of the orchestra, you know. Taught me something. Helped me prepare for this week's sermon about outsiders, about welcoming them, and about being open to love, open to sharing God's love. For me, it is ironic that here in our country, this nation where there are so many children that don't even get the crumbs from a table, so many American children, and of course children all over the world that are starving, our churches are still arguing about who can even come in the door and be embraced by God's grace. No, we don't turn them away. It doesn't matter what or who or when. We don't turn them away. We welcome them in. What we can demand is that they receive the gift. What we can ask is that they come and be open to receiving God's love. And eventually, I'm not going to ask someone who just walked in the door to come and join the board of trustees and fix all the physical plant stuff in the church. But eventually, I hope that person, like Wayne did, will become an integral part of this community. And we'll start to actually give back and welcome in more strangers. Because that's what we've got to do. Sure, there is actual evil in the world. And I'm not advocating that you should, oh, come on in, evil. Sure. Yeah. But the only way we can fight evil, the only way we can fight darkness and hate is with light and love and righteousness and holiness. So our challenge is for us and our hearts and our minds and our spirits to be opened up to receive God's abundant love and overflowing grace, and then to turn around and give away our rainbow fish scales. Share it. Amen.